Welcome to Let's Talk BD podcast, powered by the BD School.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Let's Talk BD podcast. Today, it's a special episode because with Concetta, which is our guest of today, we actually have a lot of things in common. We come from the same region in Italy. We live in the same country, in the Netherlands. We even have a bit of a similar background. So I think it's going to be a very interesting episode. And the reason I asked her to come here is because she's a thought leader. And in particular, she's the creator of a framework called Sustainable Focus. So today we're going to talk about focus, attention, and really becoming more effective business developers by increasing our focus. So Concetta, thank you so much for being here. And, tell our audience who you are and what you do.
Hello, thank you for having me. So I'm Concetta Chiarelli and I'm an attention specialist and expert and also a researcher. So I research about attention, and lately I've been doing this for almost 15 years. And I developed, based on all the research and all the experience I had during these years, I've been developing this framework that is called Sustainable Focus. And actually, is like the end, but also the start of a new a new chapter. But it's the end of a chapter that has been quite interesting because I have a very diverse background. So I started, as you mentioned before, studying political science, and there, like everyone says, that you go for political science when you still can make a decision. Actually, that was kind of true for me, but it was also very interesting to be able to study something that was that had like a very broad approach, and that for me has been always like the most important thing, and it's something that also drives me nowadays, because I really like to see everything in a very broad perspective, like considering also all the different fields, because when you start seeing something from very different point of views, you always get a different approach. You have a broader approach. You can see things in a very different way, and also it helps you to frame problems in a different way so that you can find different solutions, and that's super important for me. And yeah, from there I started studying about social science and like a broader approach to everything, especially decision making, like how we decide, why we behave in this way. And I've been always interested in music and sound, and I started to say, okay, but how like sound and the way we are exposed to environment can change the way we behave, can affect the way we behave. And from there, I started studying this psychoacoustics, so the way we perceive and the way we act accordingly or not. And then, from there, I started developing my interactive interface, which was an interactive floor that gave me the opportunity to study the relationship between the sound we produce and the behavior, the gesture. And that was the really beginning of all my studies. And from there, I started implementing this thing with people, like with every kind of person, like regardless the job and everything, the age. And I discovered so many things that I started writing down everything and create this framework that ended up being a very useful tool to deal with focus, with attention, but also that gave me the possibility to rethink about focus and attention. And I started seeing, okay, what they always tell, all these problems and everything. If you consider focus just from a brain perspective, like a cognitive approach, yes, that can be. But if you consider a lot of other elements that we are not taking into account in the equation, then you see a totally different reality.
Very diverse background. And yeah, I also studied political science, but in my case, I actually did really choose it with cognition. I really liked that field. I then realized that I didn't like to work in that field because I found it very structured, right? While I love the creativity that business development affords. But of course, now your main focus is, of course, on your framework, which is sustainable focus. So what does that actually mean? What is sustainable focus?
Sustainable focus is a framework that allows you to improve your focus, but moving from an idea of sustained focus, which is something like I have to be focused on this, I have to get these things done, to something that is not just what you do, but also the way you do. So sustainably, because when you focus, you have to sacrifice a lot of resources. It's a very narrow activity. If you think from the sustained attention, sustained focus, but in that case, you end up sacrificing also some things that you want to take into account, because otherwise, at some point, you will be more stressed. You will be more also exhausted. And also I realized that the more you focus on something very hard, the less you are creative, because of course when you are focused, you have to sacrifice creativity and like thinking in a more open, more than a broader way. So basically, it's moving from a task and like doing this task in a very focused, very narrowed way to consider this activity in your life and in the long term, not just in this day, but also during the week, during the month. And it helps you create this kind of balance between like focusing on something, but also recovering, also nurturing creativity, reducing stress and all this kind of stuff. And that because what is really, really vital in this framework is that focus is really connected with creativity and stress. The more we focus, the more we have to sacrifice a lot of information that are coming from the environment, for the outer world, that we have to filter. And this filtering for us is very costly. So the more we focus, the more we increase the stress of not being connected and the exhaustion that comes from filtering out stuff. So this is very important because rarely this is taken into account. And also the relationship with focus and creativity, because if you think about sustained focus, meaning staying on the task and filtering out everything else, it's just the opposite attitude that you have when you are creative, because when you are creative, you are putting all the things together. But in this case, you don't have all these things. You have to filter them out. So this really idea of thinking about this connection between creativity and stress and creating a balance and think on a longer term, this is what really is sustainable focus. I mean, this is the main the foundation, yes, of sustainable focus.
Yeah, and I think I understand what you mean, in the sense that sometimes over the year, and I think you probably can relate, and probably you listening too, right? But there's some moments in the year in which I like to say I feel like in a washing machine, in the sense like I have a lot of deadlines, maybe we're doing a lot of training, we have some travel involved and so on. So there are these times of the year in which I'm required to be extremely focused on the task at hand. Like I cannot do anything else. Like, for example, I love to play tennis. if I'm on a week that is like in the washing machine, I cannot play tennis, right? And that for me, it is very costly in the sense that I love to play tennis. It helps me relax. It gives me that little like social element that I don't have if I'm just in front of the computer, right? So in that sense, I understand, because then usually I feel just very tired. And what you said about creativity is like, I can't, like if I have to think even something basic, but like a post that I have to share on my LinkedIn profile, it becomes so tiring to do that thing. And then eventually I cannot do it well, right? So how can you get out of it, because sometimes you have to do it, like you don't have an option, but then you're exhausting yourself and you're less creative. So how can we fix this problem?
That's exactly the question. That is the very beginning of like sustainable focus. Sustainable focus is the thing that answer exactly this question. There are a lot of things that we have to take into account, but first of all, we need to start thinking that something like having a break, like going for a tennis match or something like this, it's not optional. It's something you have to do. Because when we think about focus, we always think about, okay, I'm focusing this hour on this task, and that's it. But that kind of focus always require another kind of focus, which is the open focus. Let's call it open focus, even if it's not accurate, but let's call it like an open focus. So, and that is really, really important. It's like you go for grocery and you buy whatever you need and you go home and you put it on the table. And that's the grocery, like the whole activity. And that's how we think about focus. But then when you go there, you have to take the grocery and you have to put it in the fridge, in the closet, because otherwise it got wasted, or like you cannot use it. You end up like losing what you put on the table. So when we think about focus, we think about like exactly like this. Go to the grocery and buy stuff and put it on the table, and put it on the table, put it on the table. At the end, you will have a table full of grocery, and maybe something is expired and you cannot use it anymore. And you have a table full of stuff and you cannot even eat on that table. When we focus always like hyper focus on something, and we do this and we do this and we do this, we are just cluttering the table. And the point is that every time we focus on something, we need that time to sort the grocery, clean the table. Otherwise, we don't have resources available anymore. So it's really, really important to schedule everything and to plan everything so that you have the, let's say, the narrow focus and the open focus. Because like the tennis match is not just relaxing time. Tennis match is part of the focus. It's the second part, it's the sorting part of the information. Otherwise, that will be wasted. The first part will be wasted. Because we haven't sorted that information, we don't know how to retrieve them, we don't know how to catalog them, we don't know anything. So it's there, it will be there for a little bit, and then you have to throw everything away. You don't put it on the closet, you don't eat it. You don't actually use that things. So we really need to shift between let's have a moment of relax into having a complete the focus process, which is composed by a narrow focus and an open focus. Because during the match, you are not just relaxing, you are reorganizing the information, you're sorting the grocery, you're organizing everything so that tomorrow or in 1 year, you can retrieve this information. This is very, very important. If we don't make this shift, we really miss the most important part. It's not just relaxing, it's completing the process. So first of all, planning is really important. So every time you, for example, plan 1 hour of deep focus, then you need at least 1 hour of open focus. And this doesn't mean listening to a podcast to learn something. That's still learning, that's still focus. Just going outside and walk the dog and, I don't know, have a like really, really something that has no tasks involved, like not demanding tasks involved.
I feel called out because that's a big thing. Like, and again, I like to see tennis. Like for me, it almost feels almost like a job because I take it really seriously. Like I have my tennis classes, and then I watch tennis, and then I read books about tennis. And sometimes that's true. Maybe after a long day of work, I might end up watching a tennis match, but I'm watching it from a perspective of like, what is he doing? Like, how is he moving? How can I replicate that? So that's true that it's not very relaxing. And what happens to me is that usually after these moments, I just feel really, really stressed out. Like, I mean, I'm stressed out to the point, that I can lash out at my friends, if they're just next to me and they tell me something that for me is wrong in that moment. I lose it, like, I mean, I don't lose it, but still I might be like unpolite, and then for me, it's really difficult to recover from that stress because then I see, okay, but I have these other 10 tasks to do. So I cannot relax, like even when I take that little time, my brain is still in that task, so is it like, I guess it's very common. I don't think I'm the only one, but, how do you help people with that, because like, how do you really manage to switch off the brain and to, not feel guilty, let's say, when you take this this relaxing time, like, how do we deal with that,
This is, as you said, this is very, very common. I mean, because we are used to it, it's so normal that we have to feel the more time we have available and the more things we want to do, and that's very normal. That's also part of the sustainable focus framework, is that you want to address a problem from different levels. So sometimes it is enough to change a strategy, but sometimes you really have to change first the beliefs that you have. Because if you think that if you are just walking is not fine, you have to do something in the meantime. So it's maybe nice to listen to a podcast so that I can learn something, because otherwise this is wasted time. So you want to also address this kind of, from a very deep perspective, you want to really shift this belief. Otherwise you will be or like trying to fill up your time, or trying to resist this urge, but feeling guilty because you're seeing this time going on and you are just doing nothing. And this is very, very important. Like, you need to have a moment where you do nothing, because like what you see, like consciously and visible, is nothing, but in the back of your mind, there are a lot of things happening. And the most important part is that you cannot force that things. You cannot doing on behalf of your, let's call it unconscious, but it's not the right word, but something that is really automatic. And you want to, you cannot do it. You cannot induce that. You cannot force that. It has to be, and that's why you get like the most beautiful ideas like while you're showering, because there you are doing exactly nothing. And that's very, very important, that we nurture that kind of time and start thinking that that's part of being productive. That's part of being not focused, but being productive, get things done. It's important to have that time. And as long as you think I'm just wasting time, you're just making a huge disservice to your mind.
Yeah, but also because what happens, I think it's nowadays it's more and more common, right? So we have social media, we have this constant flux of information, right? So and we live like, I don't know if it's like a society, that wants you to always be productive, because there are many things that realistically don't make you more productive, right? But they do create this fear of missing out, which then makes you like, okay, no, if I don't do this, if I'm not working 2 hours more than my competitor, if I'm not doing this more than someone else, like you feel like you're falling behind, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's a big problem nowadays, because then we are in this society in which we're constantly doing something, not necessarily because we want to, but because we feel we have to. I think that's a big problem. What's your take on this?
Yeah, this is very interesting. This very point is very interesting because I don't think it's the society that make us do this. It's a very normal and let's say, yeah, that's a normal response. Because if you think about it, you have a lot of information around you and you don't know which one is important. So you don't want to miss this information because potentially it could be important. So it's very healthy to think in this way. The problem is when a lot of information are available and they look very similar, it's difficult for you to immediately understand what is important and what is not. So what is relevant for you. So you have to go through all of them because you want to be sure that you are not missing important things. So this is very healthy. Like the FOMO, what we call FOMO, that seems to be something very bad, is the most important thing to make you survive, because you want to be aware of what is happening around you so that you can act and in on time, so that you can protect yourself and be like have an advantage. So this is very important. But the point is that, of course, now we have too much information. So that's really the disproportion is that the most, like, the thing that is creating this kind of problem, let's call it. So it's normal because it's very healthy to go there and evaluate all this information. But the point is that the information are too much. So that's why it's nice, for example, to reduce information. One thing that is really, really nice to do, for example, is like find someone, for example, about topics. If you are interested in business, for example, if you are interested in tennis, so find one or two sources that you consider reliable. And it's not that they have to be reliable your whole life, but let's say for this year, for 6 months, I don't want to listen to everybody. I just want to listen to this guy or this girl. And you go just for them, because if you're open to everything, it's a huge problem, because then you have to deal with a lot of information. So one thing you can do is reduce the information and maybe select a couple of sources that can be like very good for you and you can think they are reliable, and just go with that, so that you have less information. And also be aware about what is your goal, because sometimes, as I was telling before about tennis and relaxing, sometimes it's very important to scroll. Just scroll, just stay there and see, okay, this is very, very funny, because we need that. It's also something that we are seeing like lately, is that, if you scroll and you watch at like meme and this kind of stuff, your brain is getting worse, and you're getting dumber, and I don't think this is true. We are not supposed to consume always something serious or something that can, let's say, be good for personal growth, for personal development, increasing knowledge, and this kind of stuff. We don't need just that. We really need also to laugh a lot. And by consuming something that also other people use to laugh and relax, we can also understand how different people like think, and we can see, okay, this makes you laugh. This is interesting, especially among friends, for example. It's something that also create community, that create like the nurture the social aspect. So I'm not among those people who think like if you scroll, if you like waste your time watching something that it's good, it's something that we really need.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just the time, right? And I can relate, like my best friend and my sisters as well probably hate me because I'm always sending them like 10,000 memes every day and the reels on Instagram. But that's true that sometimes, at night, I'm just like after a day of work, especially like days in which I have like, let's say 6, 8 hours training sessions, right? And I'm just talking. At some point, I don't want to talk. I just want to lay there and just like doom scroll, or that's it, because that doesn't make my brain busy. I'm just doing something that doesn't require any sort of effort, right? So that is I see the point. Then of course it depends, like what you said, right? It depends on what you feed your brain with, right? Because it's I can relate with finding a few sources. What happens to me is that after a while I get bored. So then I need to change sources, right? I feel like I maxed out what I can learn from that person, let's say, and then I move on, right?
Exactly. But yeah, exactly. Then you choose when you want to change, but it's the most important thing is that you reduce the decisions you have to make. If you have a lot of things to evaluate, then you get more exhausted because you have to make more decisions. So yeah, I think that like reducing the sources, and also like another important thing is when you consume stuff. Because for example, in the very first thing that you do when you wake up, it's usually is what set the tone for your day, not the whole day, but at least the first part, which is usually the most important. So if you go and you start like all the disasters or the bad news and everything, that's a really bad problem. I mean, you have to deal with those thoughts the whole day. And this happens. It's normal. It's not that you are weird or you don't work properly. It's normal. So one thing, and it's also related to motivation. For me, for example, it's really nice to start the day with resetting your life, saying why I'm here, what is that gives me motivation, what I really want to do today, and that will be the building of the first part. And then you go, okay, now I need to see also the news. It's fine, but you don't want to read 1,000 different pieces of news. Sometimes you don't need all that information because you cannot even act upon that. So it's really nice to be more conscious about what you consume and how much things you consume and the frequency. You don't need all that.
Yeah. That's a lesson taken, because that's a bit of my problem. Like, I'm a bit of a control freak, so I like to always be informed about everything. But that's very true. Like most of the times, and especially nowadays, there's so many bad things happening in the world, so you're like constantly bombarding with these news. And then I'm like, I take it almost personally. But as you said, right, you cannot really control everything. So at some point, you just have to, get along with your day, right? But of course, well, I start by saying, of course, there are these moments in which is really like the washing machine moments, like super busy and so on, and that you have to do. But obviously, it's not always like that, right? So I also have the opposite problem, which is sometimes I know I have to do things, and I have this long to-do list, and like a lot of things. And sometimes I also think, oh, maybe I could kind of anticipate the work that I have to do in 2 weeks. I would be happy if I do it. But then I don't, and I'm like, yeah, I see that there is a task on my calendar, the task on my notebook, and then something happens. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this thing. Now, usually my distractors are, I don't know, I see like the house, it's not really properly in order, so then I want to put in order, or my mom calls me, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna talk to her, or I receive a message, or anything, like the latest, like they were making works in my building and there were like workers passing next to my window. So every 2 seconds, like, what are you doing? And then, like at the end of the day, I'll be like, I didn't do anything today, and then of course you feel bad and so on. And then you start panicking and you get stressed, So how do you do, like to actually focus when you're not in this, like kind of obliged situation, but you have pretty much an easy day. You have to do things, but then everything happens and you don't do those things. How do you focus?
So this is very personal because every person has a different strategy here, and I've seen this a lot. But usually, as you said, for example, in your case, it is quite of visible, this strategy that you have to have like you have to be not obliged, but you have to see that you have to do this. And when you don't perceive you have to, then it's difficult to motivate. And usually it works exactly like this. If you have something that really motivates you, do you notice distractions? You have, for example, your mom calling you and you're saying, no, I'm doing this, is very important. Let's talk tonight. Or do you see someone passing by? You don't notice them because you are so motivating what you are doing that you don't notice distractions. And usually, actually, we talk a lot about distractions are as if they are the reason, but actually is that we are not motivated or engaged enough. And here there are a lot of things that you can do actually. You can use your own motivation, your own strategy, because for example, you said, I see the task on the calendar, but you don't see the task in your life, like being kind of like there, like telling you have to do this, you have to, it's time to do this. Usually people have this kind of strategies. So in your case, for example, you don't want to see on the calendar because that won't be compelling for you. You have to make it compelling in a different way. And that's really personal. So for example, a lot of people start seeing something compelling and required and urgent when they see what happens if they don't do it. So they have to see, okay, I'm going to go through this if I don't do it. Or they have to see clearly the details, for example. So when they start picturing the thing, it's time to do it. But if you don't have that, you don't do it. So that's why it's really important to understand the strategy. So when I say strategy, I mean like all the actions and the activities that leads you to that result every time, the same result. So like in a very consistent way. So it's very important to understand what leads you usually to do something without being distracted, and then apply the same strategy to exactly when you don't feel that. It's like forcing in that way, and it won't be like forcing because you actually are going through your own strategy. So usually that's really, really important. But usually like there are two big groups of people, like people who have to see what happens if they don't do it. So they have to feel that kind of feeling, okay, I'm going like to face this. And the other group usually is that they get very, very excited at seeing something, like literally picturing. They say, okay, I really love to go there. And yeah, maybe like basically that's the...
Yeah, so I like to tip is that's something like, by the way, this sounds almost like a therapy session, which I'm very happy about. But, ever since I was a kid, also at school, like I would always study, the last day, I would always do the thing the last day. I remember even at the, well, we're both Italian. So in the secondary school, for like all of you listening, we have an exam. So we are 13 and we have to do our exam, right? One of the exam is the Italian exam. So we have to write, let's say, an essay, on a given topic. And I remember like on that exam, I chose a topic, but I couldn't write anything. I was like so like blocked. I don't know. I just couldn't write it. So at the end, I think we had maybe 3-4 hours to do it. In the last hour, I decided to change topic. My professor was panicked. I was like, what are you doing? Like, no, you don't do this. So like, I cannot write that. So I don't know, like I have to do something. So I changed and I wrote basically out of 4 hours, only the last hour, I wrote this essay, and it ended up being really good, you know. But the problem is that it's very stressful to do like this. But I realized that I like to think that I work very well under pressure. But then again, it's not, I don't think it's very sustainable, right? Getting back to the sustainable focus, because like you have this burst of energy and like pressure, and it's like, okay, I have to because I have this deadline. So how could I trick my brain in that sense? You're like, do you think like setting myself mid deadlines or something like that, do you think that maybe could help me or something?
Okay, it could be useful. It really depends. Or for it's a strategy that works. So you demonstrate to yourself that this works. So maybe it's a strategy you can take for just a couple of things that are very important, and you take that so that you don't use it always, because always is kind of not sustainable. But then you have to, maybe you can keep it for very, very important things. And then for the rest, you can trick, let's say, your brain. I think, yes, it's instead of tricking your brain, it's more of using the strategy more intentionally. So you can figure out which are the elements of this strategy that I can apply to this situation without the burning part, and see what works without that part that I can apply to everything that I do during the day. It makes me think about all those people who are always late, so they change the time that put in advance, and they start thinking, but I changed the time, so they are compensating because they know that the clock it's in advance, it's set in advance. So of course you don't want to get that. You want to be more intentional, and that's really personal, but it's something that it can be done, because what I think is that we have a very we don't really figure out, we don't really understand that we can train this kind of attitude, strategy, and everything. That's really important. That's why I think everyone should address this problem and trying to figure, because when you know your strategy, you can play with it. And the fact is that we have the strategies, but they are we are not aware of it. So we act like more like of a reflex. It's more of a like not being in control. So just like
more reactive, right?
Exactly, reacting instead of using it and leverage it. So that's really, really important, because when you know how to use that, then you are more in control and you can really work way better.
And that's a very interesting topic also, because like I notice it with a lot of our students, right? So in the context of the business development training, we do a lot of exercises, you know, and typically it depends on the needs, on the challenges that the student is facing, right? But let's take a general example of a business developer, which I think relates with most of you listening, right? So let's say the student comes and is like, well, I'm not getting results, so I'm not able to find a lot of clients, right? I said, okay, let's look at, you know, what's happening. What is happening very often is that the reason why they're not getting clients is because they're not actually doing the tasks that are going to help them find these clients. For example, very basic example, but, you know, sending cold emails, you know. So then we go like, okay, great. So you only reach out to 5 people. That's not enough. So we need to do more. We need to do personalized emails. So look, typical exercise, write 5 personalized emails a day, you send them out, and then we build up from there, you know? So 1 week passes, you know, and then the student comes back and is like, so did you write the emails? Like, actually, no, I didn't have time, because then, you know, my boss like scheduled this, and then I had to go to this event, and then, I don't know, I just didn't have time, you know? I was like, yeah, okay, but you work like at least 8 hours a day, more or less, right? Maybe 5 days a week. There should be time to send 5 emails. It's not that much, you know? So what happened, you know? And I don't know what happens. I don't know what happens. But then usually the result is they don't get clients, but it's not because fundamentally their business is wrong. Like, it's just because they're not doing those things, you know? So why they're not doing those things? Help me.
There are a lot of reasons. In this case, I think they are not really motivated, meaning, okay, they are thinking, okay, I'm going to subscribe to this course and I will get this result. And that's the thing. When they see the thing, they see, I'm going to follow the course and like magically I will get the result. But of course you have to apply the thing. You have to, the only way you have to get results is by action. And really, it's like, I always think about the Google map, for example. You say, I want to go there, and Google Maps show you like the path, the duration, and everything. But if you don't start walking, actually you don't get any redirection. Actually, you don't see the time. The time is always that, but you don't see it decreasing because you are not walking. So it's just a piece of information, but it's really, really related to what you do. And if you don't start walking, you don't get there. And I mean, there is no shortcut. And you have to do it. And often I think when they don't do that, it's really they don't think they are not compelled. So that's the point. And being compelled, it's exactly the same as I told you before. Maybe you can play like creating this state, or you can have like a very big motivation, like in the morning you say, where I want to go, what do I need to this? Oh, I have this course, of course, I'm here to do this. And you want to see the results. But so it works at a very, very different levels. It can be the strategy, it can be the higher level motivation, your own why, let's call it like this, if it's not just that, but the real motivation. So there are a lot of things. Or you see, it's not really, okay, what it happens if you don't have prospects, if you don't have clients signing up for your product, what happens? If the answer is, well, actually nothing, then you don't need to do that. It's very, very important also to be very honest with yourself and say, why I'm doing this? What happens if I don't finish this? If the answer is nothing, really nothing, then it's important to tell yourself, it's okay. You don't go to Lucia and say, oh, I'm not getting the results, because it's part of it's part of your game. You don't need results there. So it's really nice going through like a very deep, let's say, assessment of why you're doing this at very different level. Because when you get results, you like spontaneously, like automatically say, okay, it has to be something I don't know. It has to be something I cannot do. But actually, it's not always the case. It's always how much I am motivated or very, very interested in doing this or making this happening.
Yeah.
It's really a lot of different levels.
And you know, because obviously, so as their trainer, right? So for me, the best success is when I see that the students obviously apply what we teach them, and then they do get results, right? So what can I do as a trainer to, you know, try to motivate them more, or like to make the course or the exercises more compelling so that they see the value in it, and then they actually do it, and then they get results?
Yeah. As you said, exactly, let them see the value. But literally, like before every time you start, even if it's the 10th like lesson, doesn't matter. You start like resetting their own interest, but give them sometimes to say, okay, why I'm here, why I'm doing this, what it is that I'm envisioning for my future and why this is super, super important. Why instead of staying outside and have a beer in the sun, I'm here like listening to Lucia and applying all this stuff. I think this has to be a reset that every time you want to do. And it has to be like, I don't know, find the best way. Maybe they want to write down, maybe they want to have like a 1 minute and a half visualization. It's really whatever they want to do, but or give them some prompts like about why they are there and why it like it's the only thing they can do in their life. It's the only thing they want. It's necessary. Why is necessary for them? If they see this before starting, then they immediately go and immediately they step into the whole material, because you can do the most beautiful program, the most beautiful activities, and they end up like not doing it.
Yeah, totally. Which is very sad, right? Because I find it a waste, really, in the literal sense, right? A waste of money, of time, and I really don't like that feeling for the students themselves, right? Because they're like, oh, well, I wasted 5 weeks and nothing really happened,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
I feel the same, right? As a trainer, is exactly
yeah,
the same, right? So you want ideally or your students to be successful, to thrive, but then obviously we're realistic, not everyone is going to be a success story,
yeah,
but
yeah,
of
yeah.
course my goal is to have as many as possible on this note. So I know that your approach is very personalized. I personally believe the same. So I don't believe in this like cookie cutter approach, like the Pomodoro technique. That really makes me
Yeah,
ick. Like I don't like it. But it's not the only one. But like all these solutions, like off the shelf solutions, right? I do believe that it's obviously more personalized, but
yeah.
obviously you did help a lot of people and the companies with increasing focus. So are there maybe top 3 tactics that really helped many of your customers improve their focus? And what are these top 3 tactics?
Okay, so let's say the first one, and remember why you're doing that. That's the most important part, because if you don't remember why you're there doing that instead of other things, it's pointless. So know why you're doing something and write down what you are doing. This seems to be so silly because you say, okay, I don't need to be remembered what I'm doing, but actually it is, because we forget. We continuously forget, and we are made for that, because we want to survive and we want to thrive. So it's important that we are able to get all these different stimuli and pay attention to that. But that, of course, is not compatible with what we want. So write down what you are doing. Okay, I am looking for the answer to this question. Which are the competitor, like my competitor? Okay, but have it always visible, because it's super, super important. And once you have that, write down everything that comes to your mind, because that, like, you really want to dump everything so that you don't lose it. Because when you have an idea, when you have a thought, it, regardless the importance, we start saying, okay, I should focus on this, but then I can forget this. So when you are in that kind of struggle, you start doing nothing, none of them. So you want to just write everything down and go back to what you're doing. And the very bigger shift, like mental shift, is that focus is not I'm always this without any distraction, but my focus will fluctuate, and the faster I go back to what I'm doing, the better. Like, we have to really, really forget that we can stay there without any distraction, without it. No, it will be like a nice dance, and you want to go back as fast as it is. But that's it basically. And when you start like judging yourself, and that's the last thing that I will mention, when you start judging yourself for being distractible, that will be very liberating because you can enjoy the whole process. And actually, when you focus on something, that's the best place and the best moment in which usually you get ideas or solution from something else. That's normal. That's the best thing you can do, and you want to leverage that. So don't just like avoid, like, don't build any expectation about hyper focus on that kind of stuff, and just enjoy the process, because it's a very complex process, sorry, and we want to just play along.
Nice. And among your clients, that you had over the years, was there maybe some weird but very effective focus trick that they tried and was actually working for them? What was that, if there is one and you can recall?
Oh, this is actually, I haven't seen something very weird, and that make me also thought that, like, get me thinking that maybe like the process is very similar. And yes, there are a lot of different. The difference is more in the strategies we use, but when it comes to tactics and this kind of stuff, like devices, for example, the response is, it's kind of common. So a lot of people find, for example, having the using Pomodoro technique, and usually it works for all of them. And then there are the other team, like, no, we don't love it. And actually, it's really like that. But set aside that, very weird things. No, I don't think.
Not true. It seems like the focus process is simple
It's
in
similar.
itself. Then, of course, it's the application, obviously, in the real life is probably what's most difficult. But then, do you maybe have or did you hear some, because obviously nowadays there are like blogs about everything and videos, like, is there maybe some tip that you heard from whoever that you think was actually bad, but also maybe dangerous for the person? Is there something like that? Do you have an example, maybe?
Yes, I have noise canceling headphones that everyone is like promoting and suggesting, because they think that the problem is distraction. So they think that as long as you remove distractions, then you will be able to focus, which is the most naive, let's say, things to say. Because of course it's not that I'm totally against that, because it's really nice to listen to a piece of music in a very in the best condition. But that's like going to the movie theater and have this amazing movie in front of you. But then you don't do that while you're walking on the street or while you're doing something different. It's a very totally absorbing experience, and you don't want to bring that in your daily life. Why? Because when you are focused, like, the paradox is that when you are focused, the more you are connected with what is happening around you, and the more you are able to be focused on what you're doing. Because, as we said before, if you have the feeling that you are missing some information, then your mind will go, what is happening there? What is happening there? And when you are there, you cannot be focused here. This is very counterintuitive, but it's exactly the same that, for example, it's used in horror movies or like thrillers, like where you need to create tension. You want to remove all the information, so you go with no music, no noise, and you have this kind of framing that eliminate the whole environment, so you don't know what is happening. You don't see anyone approaching. You have just you with no information, and there, like, the tension is super high because you have no information. So the very same thing you build when you use noise canceling headphone in different environments. So, and usually the less you know the environment, and the more stressful is to not knowing what is about, what is around, because you want to be safe first and then focus. It doesn't happen the other way around. So one of the most counterintuitive things is this one. And even because when you use it, it's not that sometimes you really manage to stay focused, but you get stressed a lot. So you have that kind of like a continuous level of stress, or instead of stress, I can use the hyperactivation level that is very high because you're focused, but you get ready to react if something happens. And you know that if you realize something happening, it will be also late because it means that you're seeing close to you. So it's not really like focus comes always when we are relaxed, let's say, when you are fine, when we know that we are in control of what, so we are able to respond. And that will be the best way. So that's why, for example, it's easier to focus in an environment that is kind of predictable, even if it's noisy, compared to a place that is very quiet, but something unpredictable can happen. So of course, if it's too noisy, then no, it's a problem for your ears. But if it's acceptable and it's like a cafe or something that is like in the background, that's actually good, even if it's not quiet, because it's predictable. So that's really something super important to consider when you think about the physiology of focus.
Oh, that's interesting. And obviously, again, we go back to the problem of stress, right? That we kind of started with it, right? Which seems to be the number one enemy of focus. Like the more stressed you are, the least you can focus, you don't manage to relax and so on. So what do you do to remove stress? You know, like what is your go-to, let's say, process or protocol to reduce stress in your life and increase focus?
So first of all, not using headphones.
These ones.
The canceling one. That's really important because it makes me feel like makes me become hyperactive. So I'm like always hyperactive, so that's not good. But one thing that I really love to is like it's really have sometimes to do something that is not related to what I'm doing. So first of all, workout, of course, like having like exercise, all that kind of stuff, without listening to something like podcast or something. If you want music, that's fine. But other than music, no, I will avoid that. And also going for a walk is always nice, and have a conversation with people, like different conversation that are not related to your job, even if then they will spark for sure something that is related, but go for like totally unrelated things. And also the activities, like something like find a hobby that is really a hobby, because nowadays we listen to this, hey, if you have a hobby you should monetize. But no, you don't have to monetize everything, because that's not how you're supposed to work. You need something that is clearly work and something that is clearly not work, because you want to like change the way you like also your thinking process in that case is different. So you want to protect these areas, But I don't think that you should schedule. So that's another thing. If you go, for example, from this to this, I'm going to work, and from 6 to 7, I'm going to the gym, because sometimes it can work accordingly. So people start saying, okay, I can wait um, to go there and to enjoy my hour. But for other people, it could be like, "Oh, this is another task." So they start seeing everything as a task. So it depends on, again, this is very personal, but I have two big teams here. Like, people who start being stressed from like scheduling. So if they see schedule, they stop working actually. And the other part is more, they really can see this chunk of time is for this, and I'm fine with this, and then I can wait to go in the other chunk of time and enjoy everything. So it really depends on you and trying to figure out what works. But usually it's nice to have a moment that is more spontaneous. And let's say it's nice to be flexible. So if you see that something is not happening, maybe it's not the time, because maybe you have too much information, maybe, and you require more time to allocate and organize that. And actually you are being focused in that moment, even if you're not aware. So also, like, stay a bit more, like, listen a bit more about what is happening, because it's not always useful to force. So even if you have a schedule, it's nice, it's like a good starting point, but then you don't want to get stressed about like exactly staying on schedule and do exactly, because you've been making prediction while scheduling stuff, but you don't know, maybe you feel different today, you feel you are more curious, so you want to leverage a moment where you are more curious, and then you will catch up with other thing when you will be in a more executive, let's say, way. And this happens. So flexibility is a huge good to have, let's say.
Nice. And well, guys, both of us are Italian, living in the Netherlands. We're here. Everything is scheduled to the last minute, really. So I don't know how it is for you, but for me, it starts to be really intense, because like I feel the same. I feel like I'm competing with all these Dutch, people that are like, they do swimming and tennis and gym and this, and plus they have successful careers, successful lives. And I'm like, oh, okay, how do I do this? While I love that in Italy we're a little bit more spontaneous, right? And we just go a little bit more with the flow. So how is it for you, actually? It's
For me, it's actually, I really love it, because for me it's I have more certainty about what to expect from other, so that I can plan my time. So this is very good for me, because I've been living in Rome for 20 years, and in Rome
chaos.
you never know what happens. So that kind of unpredictability was really affecting what I could do with my own time. So it was crazy, because you know that you're going to a place, but you don't know how much time it will take. So you can stay 3 hours in a car, like waiting for something to happen. So here I really enjoy everything being planned, because then I know that I have 4 hours to do whatever I want. So it gives me more predictability. So I really enjoyed it. But of course, it's really subjective, because we have always these two teams. Like, the other people say, no, I cannot understand, I cannot stand this. It's too much for me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind it, because, for example, like I'm also quite organized, like as you were saying, oh, the hobbies should be on your calendar. I have like tennis, I have to chip on my calendar. I'm just looking at it now. But what I find like a bit too like stressful, let's say, is the social aspect that is also
Yeah,
scheduled,
yeah,
like this for me is like this, it adds a lot of stress, because like if I know that in 2 weeks I have like, let's say, a dinner with friends, I don't know how I'm gonna feel in 2 weeks, maybe in 2 weeks I don't want to see that friend because they annoyed me the day before and I don't want to spend the night with them,
yes, yes,
so
yes.
that
That's
is
so true.
stressful for me.
That's so true. That's so true. But well, there are
Yeah.
strategies also. There are strategies also there to make you to get prepared to a dinner if you are even if you are not in the mood. There are a lot of.
uh,
I mean,
Spill the
yeah.
tea. Tell me, what's one strategy? So I have something on in a few days that I'm like stressing out about. So how
Well,
do I fix that?
actually, it's really easy, let's say, if you practice. Because actually sometimes if okay, maybe it's a bad day, we had a lot of things going on, but then the way we live things usually is how we prepare them in our mind. So we know, okay, this will be a disaster because my day has been a disaster so far and I feel so bad and blah blah blah. So we end up creating, let's say, that thing. So instead of just like jump into that thing in exactly the way you are, it's the same thing I was telling before. Set your dinner, just take half an hour or 1 hour, like no, 1 hour is definitely a lot, but in the morning let's have 10 minutes, 15 minutes that you think about your dinner or something that will be amazing, like visualize, or I don't know, whatever you want to, like whatever you like to create this picture or this movie that will be really really nice. And also right after, like right before the dinner, just stop for 10 minutes and say, I'm going to start this dinner. This dinner, maybe it's not the best day for me, but it will be really nice because first, I have friends. Two, I have this possibility to stay with them and enjoy them. And also, it will be a nice, anyway, it will be a nice opportunity to exchange ideas and everything. Because a lot of time we forget that what we do is also a huge luck. I mean, it's something that is an opportunity to enjoy. And since when we have everything scheduled, we have our things to do, we forget to stop and reset and say, okay, why I'm doing this? Because I love these people. Why I'm doing this? Because I want these people to be in my life. What it means, it means that I'm a nice person, that I have friends, and no one is not taking nothing for granted. So I really love to use this kind of stuff because they really help you like get in the mood, because at the end of the day you create the mood. Even if you are not aware, you always create the mood and you create expectations, so we can play with that.
Awesome. And Concetta, just to finish off, do you have maybe some resources, your go-to resources for someone that wants to learn more about the science behind focus and really become a more focused person, but more sustainable focused person? What are your top resources for that?
Of course, it's me.
Obviously.
My newsletter, but not because I want to advertise it, but actually because the thing that I do is filtering out all the things that are out there. And usually the things that are out there are a bit, I don't want to say biased, but they are very contradictory, because often you have these people who have to create content and they usually pick everything that is around. So one day they tell you something and the other day they tell you exactly the opposite. And you're like, what is this? So what I'm doing is actually take all the things and create a kind of consistency so that you can go through a consistent process. About other people doing something similar, I really don't have one, because sometimes they say something interesting and sometimes they kind of
Yeah,
have to
I
double
feel
down on
that.
something that Exactly. But one person that I really love, especially about productivity,
Mm-hmm.
is Oliver Berkman, the
Mm-hmm.
guy who wrote 4,000th Week.
Mm-hmm.
4,000th Week, yes. That book, it's super, super nice. If I think that if you want to think about productivity in a sustainable way and also focus, because of course they
Mm-hmm.
are very, very related.
Related.
That book is amazing because it really gives you a totally different mindset. And it's lovely. I mean, I read it and I was like, I really needed to listen to something like this. So that's high recommended. But then, yeah, and no, other than that, I really don't have like reliable. And also for productivity in a more practical
Mm-hmm.
point of view, it's David Allen, Get Things Done. That kind of
Mm-hmm.
framework really is really. But again, it, as you said before, it's a book, and if you don't apply that, then it's useless. With the Oliver Berkman book is more about mindset, so it may be a bit more useful because maybe it managed to shift your mindset. So
Awesome. Concetta, thank you so much. As said at some point, it really felt for me a sort of a therapy session, which is very welcome. But I'm pretty sure that also for you listening, you learned a lot and hopefully learned a new perspective on focus, on sustainable focus. Now, obviously, I do recommend you to follow Concetta on LinkedIn. She posts a lot of practical tips on focus, so you can, just she can be one of those people that you follow in terms of focus and productivity. Obviously, do sign up to the newsletter. I believe I didn't do it yet, so I'm going to do it right now. But everyone listening, I will put the link below in the description, of course, with Concetta's LinkedIn profile. Is there maybe other ways that you prefer people to get in touch with you if they have some questions?
no, LinkedIn is perfect, but there is also my email if they want, always on LinkedIn, so it's really easy. Yeah.
Perfect. So everyone, that's going to be your next task for today. Just go and follow Concetta and subscribe to the newsletter. Of course, for those of you who made it until the end, if you enjoyed this episode, please put a like and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any other very interesting and practical information. For now, Concetta, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you very much.
And everyone, I'll see you next week with a new episode.
Subscribe and listen to more episodes of Let's Talk BD podcast.